There is a map in a library in Paris. It was drawn in 1375, and it is considered the most important map of the Middle Ages. On that map, European cartographers drew an African king on a golden throne. They knew his name. They knew his empire controlled half the world's gold. They knew his universities rivaled their own. They gilded their churches with his gold, minted their coins from his mines, and painted his portrait on their most sacred document. And then they erased him from every textbook. This is not the story of Mansa Musa. This is the story of who erased him, and why. By the end of the 14th century, over 2/3 of all the gold circulating in Europe comes from a single source, West Africa. The golden halos painted on the Virgin Mary in Italian churches, that gold comes from Mali. The coins in Portuguese treasuries, minted from Malian gold, arriving through Morocco. Historian Astley Goodwin put it bluntly. The crescent had access to gold. The cross did not. Europe doesn't just know about the Mali Empire. Europe's entire economy depends on it. Every cathedral ceiling, every royal crown, every illuminated manuscript, funded by gold from an empire most Europeans will never learn existed. And the man who controls all of it decides to take a road trip. In 1324, Mansa Musa departs the city of Niani for the Islamic holy pilgrimage to Mecca. He brings 60,000 men, 12,000 slaves, each dressed in gold brocade and Persian silk. 500 slaves march ahead of him, and each one carries a staff made of pure gold. Behind them, 80 camels lumber through the Sahara, each loaded with up to 300 pounds of gold dust. 18 tons of gold, over $1.4 billion in today's money. 6,000 miles of desert, and every grain of sand his caravan touches turns into a story the world will tell for centuries. This is the largest single display of personal wealth in recorded human history, and it's heading straight for Cairo. When the caravan arrives in Cairo, the largest gold market on earth, Mansa Musa doesn't invade. He doesn't threaten. He does something far more devastating. He gives gold away. To everyone. Beggars receive solid blocks of gold. Merchants are paid with fistfuls of gold dust for goods worth a fraction of the price. Every Friday, Musa has an entirely new mosque built, just so he has somewhere to pray that week. He distributes 20,000 gold pieces in Cairo alone. And then the economy collapses. The sudden flood of gold triggers catastrophic hyperinflation. The price of a mythful of gold drops from 25 silver dirhams to less than 22, and it does not recover for 10 years. One man's generosity causes an estimated $1.5 billion in economic damage across the entire Middle East. On his return journey, Musa realizes what he's done, so he tries to fix it in the most audacious way possible. He borrows gold back from Cairo's moneylenders at enormous interest rates. 50,000 dinars from a single merchant named Siraj al-Din ibn al-Kawake. The moneylenders are thrilled. Gold prices stabilize. The crisis appears to be over. Then Mansa Musa arrives home in Mali and repays every single debt in one massive lump payment. Gold prices collapse again. He has ruined, repaired, and ruined Cairo's gold economy. A triple manipulation that some historians believe was entirely deliberate. A strategic strike against his competitors, disguised as generosity. If this were just about gold, it would already be the most extraordinary story in economic history. But Mansa Musa's empire had something even more valuable. Timbuktu. Under Mansa Musa's patronage, the University of Sankore becomes the largest center of learning the world has seen since the Library of Alexandria. 25,000 students study mathematics, astronomy, chemistry, geography, physics, and business ethics. The city holds over 1 million handwritten manuscripts. And here's the detail that should stop you cold. One Islamic scholar living in Timbuktu notes in his diary that his personal library of 1,600 books is considered one of the smallest private collections in the city. 1,600 books, one of the smallest. At this exact moment in history, the entire University of Oxford owns a few hundred manuscripts. Musa sends scholars on exchange programs to Morocco, Egypt, Mecca, and Tunisia. This is not a primitive backwater. This is the intellectual capital of the medieval world. And there's one detail so small, so mundane, that it reveals how completely this history was buried. The square academic cap, the mortarboard worn at every Western graduation. Some historians trace its origins to the turbans worn by Islamic scholars in cities like Timbuktu. Medieval graduates in West Africa are said to have tossed their turbans into the air upon receiving their diplomas. Whether the connection is direct or symbolic, the implication is the same. An empire that funded Europe's economy, that built universities rivaling anything in Christendom, that may have even shaped the graduation traditions Western students still perform today. All of it erased. And the question is no longer whether it was forgotten. The question is whether it was deliberate. Mansa Musa dies around 1337. What happens next determines whether the world remembers him or forgets him forever. Mansa Musa dies around 1337. His empire spans 9 modern African countries: Senegal, Mauritania, Ghana, Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, the Gambia, and Ivory Coast. His sons inherit all of it. They cannot hold it. The Songhai Empire moves in from the east, swallowing Timbuktu and Gao, 2 of Mali's greatest cities. Political corruption erodes what military force cannot take. And then the Black Death arrives. It doesn't reach Mali directly, but it devastates Morocco, and Morocco is the bridge between Mali's gold and Europe's hunger for it. The trade routes that made Mali the center of the world begin to collapse. But the cruelest blow doesn't come from outside. It comes from within. The new rulers silence the griots. In West Africa, the griots are the keepers of everything. They are the living libraries, oral historians who memorize centuries of genealogies, treaties, battles, and laws, and pass them down generation after generation through spoken word. It is through the griots that an empire without a printing press preserves its entire history, and the new rulers destroy them. Through forced conversion and outright execution, the living memory of the Mali Empire is systematically erased. What survives exists only in Arabic manuscripts locked inside Timbuktu's private libraries, and in the accounts of foreign visitors like Al-Amari and Ibn Battuta. Mali's own people are severed from their own story. But the griots are only the first erasure. The second is far more calculated. In the 15th century, Portugal sends ships down the West African coast. These voyages are not about exploration. They are about extraction. The Portuguese establish the Gold Coast, a direct pipeline to African gold that bypasses every trans-Saharan middleman who had connected Mali to Europe for centuries. They don't need to acknowledge Mali as a civilization. They don't need to record its universities or its scholars or its king on a golden throne. They just need the gold. And as European powers discover new wealth in the Americas, Africa's role in the global story is quietly rewritten. Not as an equal trading partner, not as the source of Europe's prosperity, but as a resource, a footnote, a colony. So the griots are silenced and the trade routes are severed. But one question remains. How did an empire that appears on Europe's most important map get deleted from Europe's own history books? This is where the story becomes uncomfortable. An Oxford University paper on Mansa Musa names it directly. Africa, it says, was studied not for its empires, riches, or cultural sophistication, but for its assumed primality. The word they use is whitewashing. Mansa Musa's life, they write, became an inconvenient truth. Historian Lisa Corin-Grazio states it even more plainly. The history of the medieval period is still largely seen only as a Western history. The Catalan Atlas proves that Europe knew. The gold in their churches proves that they profited. And the empty pages in their textbooks prove that they chose to forget. This was not an oversight. This was an edit. And yet the empire didn't vanish completely. Something survived. The Timbuktu manuscripts, over 1 million of them, endured for centuries, hidden in private family libraries across the city, passed down from generation to generation in secret. When Islamic extremists seized Timbuktu in 2012 and began burning cultural artifacts, volunteers organized a covert operation. They smuggled hundreds of thousands of manuscripts to safety in the back of donkey carts, in rice sacks, in the trunks of cars. These documents cover medicine, astronomy, law, theology, mathematics, and human rights. They are the physical, undeniable proof that medieval Africa produced scholarship that rivaled anything in Europe. And they are still being translated today. Mansa Musa's estimated net worth, adjusted for inflation, was $400 billion. More than Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates combined. He ruled an empire that stretched 2,000 miles. He built universities that housed 25,000 students when Europe's finest barely had a few hundred. He crashed a continental economy with nothing but generosity. He appeared, by name, on the most famous European map of the medieval world. And the average Western student today will graduate knowing more about a single Roman senator than about the richest human being who ever lived. Let that settle for a moment. In 1375, a European cartographer sat down and drew an African king on a golden throne. He knew, they all knew, the gold in their churches came from his mines. The scholarship in his universities rivaled their own. The graduation ceremony their students still perform today was invented in his city. And then they closed the book. Mansa Musa is not a hidden chapter of history. He is proof that someone has been editing the book all along. And the question you should be asking yourself right now isn't what you were never taught. It's what else was erased. If that question keeps you up tonight, subscribe. Because someone has to rewrite the chapters they tore out.